Well, this business today has been an interesting exercise. This shot right here is where we started, and as you can kind of see, I suppose I could just do this. The drawing of Akari is just a bit weak, and actually the characterization of Mr. Big really wasn't quite right either. So some time ago, not a super long time ago, I went ahead and I patched it up. Let's see, can we put this full screen? Yeah. So you can see we patched up Mr. Big, and Akari looks better too. The problem is, and I don't know if you guys can see this, but if you look real closely, um, you can see it. Yeah, I guess we can. Sorry about that. With a video, it's a little winky in the viewer here. But what I'm doing is I'm hitting Control and then rolling my mouse button. So see this? See that line? Okay. That line is something I've talked about a fair amount in recent videos because the 4.3 version of Krita seems to reduce those sort of anomalies. However, this shot was done in the 4.3 alpha, and we still got the anomalies. Now the question becomes, well, why are the anomalies there? They're there because if you want to take, in this case, here's the shot I want. This is the framing I want. Okay, so it seems like no problem. Just apply a transform mask. Now the reason you use a transform mask is because if you simply did a transformation with the free transform tool, like, okay, we can move her around or resize her or whatever, the problem is I would then have to do that operation. This is actually, I have to say, this is actually a really good illustration of a situation where guys like me might seem really anal and picky and complaining all the time, but I'll kind of show you why this is such an amazing problem to me. If you want to apply that transformation over a series of animated frames, in other words, a series of cells, you would have to apply the transformation individually to each cell. Now, if there was a way to do that with a predictable end result every time, I'd be fine with that. So an example of how that might work is, what if in the Krita filters, we've got all these artistic filters, and we've got frames, and we've got blurring and sharpening, we've got all kinds of things, but the one thing we don't have is the ability to apply a transformation as a filter. If you did, then you could apply a filter, transform as a filter. Let's say you size this up like this, and then you'd actually say, well, okay, now I'm going to go through each of these additional frames and just hit Control F, because Control F simply repeats the last filter. Now, from an animation standpoint, that becomes really interesting. Why? Because what if the transformation only scaled her up a little bit? Okay, let's say I scaled her up maybe 3%. And then in the next frame, I would hit Control F twice to scale that one up 6%, and then 9%. Now I've actually got a way. It's not the smoothest, easiest in the world, but I have a way seamlessly to program transformations into my animation. So in that scenario, obviously what I would be doing is I'd be zooming in on her. By just repeatedly applying the transformation in a kind of you sort of plan out what you're going to do, so you can map out the timing and everything, but basically that would be fine. Well, the problem is there really is no way to do that. You can, yes, there are numeric there really aren't, actually. If I go to a standard transform here, there's actually no way to numerically tell it what I want to do. You sort of can by selecting scale and then putting in percentages. So you can do it, but the problem then is Krita never remembers the last setting. Okay, so what that means is if I were to apply a transform, let's say I wanted it to be scaled up 105%. So I click this to lock the width and the height, and I scale her up. Okay. Well, actually, the order of operations is the following. Click, then lock it, then scale it, hit return. Okay? And then when you go to the next frame, Krita resets everything. It doesn't remember anything. So you have to click again, lock again, put in the numbers again. Okay, so you guys get the idea. So when I complain, the reason I find that frustrating is because all of the mechanics and all the capability to put automated I guess transformations or modifications of an animated sequence or a frame, all the capabilities to do it in a very intelligent way, in a very intuitive way that's extremely useful to an animator, all the tools are there. But it's just pretty obvious that the developers don't actually use Krita for animation, because if they did, they'd be bumping into this stuff and go, wow, you know, this is really, really clunky. And when I investigated the scripting API, because there is a scripting API, you can program, you can write a Python program to automate functions in Krita. Well, guess what's the one part of the Krita ecosystem that is not exposed in the Python API? You guessed it, animation. The one thing you can't do in the Python API is access the animation frame. It boggles the mind, but because obviously when you're talking about macros, you know, repeated operations are what macros or scripts are all about. And there is no domain where there's more repeated operations than animation. Okay. So anyway, so my point is that to get a predictable outcome with the free transform tool, you can't script it. It won't remember your settings. There really isn't an elegant way to manually put in the parameters that you want without lots of clicking. You know, you get carpal tunnel syndrome. Okay. So the final solution is a transform mask, which again, this is like so much of Krita. It's brilliant. I mean, it's a great thing, you know, because the transform mask lets you apply it to a layer, which means that every single cell in the layer gets transformed the same. You see? Except for one hiccup. And the hiccup is that Krita is notorious for having bad resource management. Meaning what? Meaning that when it does the transform, it introduces problems like we saw here. Where is this? The problem like we saw here. That line is the result of Krita applying a transform mask and then basically not doing the math correctly, so that when it reconstitutes the pieces, because okay, when Krita applies a filter, what's really going on is it's taken the image, breaking it up into pieces. And by the way, right now because of this transform mask, my mouse is all stupid. Okay, so let's just redo this again. Okay. So what Krita does is it breaks it up into, you know, regions. How big those are, I'm not sure. With some programs like Blender, you can tell the renderer how small to break the pieces into. It's basically a memory management concern. But so what's happening is Krita's going in and saying, let's apply the filter to this rectangle first, then this rectangle, and then what it does is it pastes them back together. Well, it's not ridiculous to see that doing that could introduce artifacts. You need to be, the area that would be of most concern by far would be this. The area between those squares, especially if you're applying like a blur filter or something, because a blur filter by definition causes the region of interest to expand because it gets blurred, right? You can see it when I go like this. When I apply a blur, just like that, these red lines just spread out to about that far. So it's not a simple problem to solve. And it just happens that Krita's pretty awful at it. And so when you apply these transform masks, what happens is you get really weird artifacting a lot of the time. I mean, I would say more often than not. Can't tell right now if this, yeah, there it is. There it is. And what's weird, and now you see that, that's the really weird part. Do you see what just happened? So you can tell that there's stuff going on in the background where Krita's processing something, because right a moment ago you could see the same anomaly that you could see over here. And yet when I zoomed in and a moment later, it's like it did some background processing and the anomaly disappeared. The problem is, so I'm going, okay, everything's working out fine. But then when I rendered it, the anomaly was in the render. So what are you going to do? So that's what the 4.3 update is kind of sort of all about. I mean, that's certainly a big part of it. The problem is it doesn't, I mean, it is pre-alpha admittedly, but basically the issues are still there. With this very shot that we're looking at, see right there you can see the anomaly again. I don't know if, yeah, I guess you should be able to, and there it disappeared. Okay, so I get the idea that there's background processing going on, right? See? So there's the anomaly, and if we wait a moment, up, there it goes. So we turn this off and turn it back on. There's the anomaly. And is it going to disappear? And there it disappeared. Now when I rendered, it was still there. And the interesting thing is, and I will just say this, it appears to me, as best I can discern, to literally be a crapshoot. Like I could maybe render this 3 times in a row, and 1 time the anomaly wouldn't be there, and 2 times it would, or something like that. You know, that's like completely normal for Krita. So you can see what I'm illustrating here is this idea of wanting to use the transform tools to just maybe recompose a frame is so common in animation that there's barely ever a shot where you wouldn't want to do that. Okay, so it's an enormously important thing to be able to do. Transform masks kind of do it. On the surface, it looks like they do it, and they do it, but they don't do it reliably. So you wind up with a lot of frustration. So in this case, what I did was I finally said, okay, to heck with it. I'm going to do it the Ed Tadeo way. So what I did was I said, let's just turn off Mr. Big and just render this out as an image sequence, and then turn her off and render this out as an image sequence. You know, that was a pretty simple solution. And then I asked myself, well, where am I going to do the next step? Well, you could bring it into Blender, obviously, and do something in 3D space. But you know what? And I decided, you know what? We're going back to OpenToonz. And, you know, I'm glad I did. Because first of all, it was seamless, okay? What I actually did was I went here, let's see here. What I did was I created a folder, and it's kind of ironic that I did it in the Blender folder, because I didn't even wind up using Blender for this. But what I did was I just created a folder, 0077, and this is what I've done for films that I've worked on as well. For special effects shots, I just create a folder that has the same name as the shot in the film, and then all the assets for that shot go in that folder. It works out quite well. So in this case, I've got a subfolder called image sequence, or IMG SEQ, and you got the Akari, and then you got the Mr. Big. Well, you can take any of these Mr. Big um, cells or images. You can take any of the images that are in the sequence. And when you drag it into OpenToonz here, OpenToonz will load the entire sequence from the beginning. How does it know to do that? Well, because it's just a simple naming convention, and it's a good thing that Krita, Blender, and OpenToonz all are really work well with this naming convention, which is you give the file a name and then you just put a dot after the name. So I called this Mr-Big period. And then what Krita did when it rendered it, so this is something that's good about Krita, is it went ahead and added 4 digits dot ping. So you got Akari dot 4 digits dot ping, same with Mr. Big, and then it was kind of brain dead to just drag these guys into OpenToonz. Now, the next step for me was I didn't really like the acting. Okay, the acting wasn't quite working for me, so I decided, you know what, as long as I'm in OpenToonz, I did a little bit of timing tweak with her head turn so that she goes quickly to her kind of deflated look, but it didn't look deflated enough for me, and I wanted to do something with her shoulders. So what I did was I just went to the last frame and I hit the X key in OpenToonz, and that automatically invoked the plastic tool. And then and if you guys aren't familiar, yeah, most of the stuff I've done lately is in Krita, so here's the workflow. It's really fast. You grab the frame you want to animate, you hit the X key, and then step 1 is you create a mesh, and you can see here how you can adjust the resolution of that mesh. I'm going to hit escape because I've already done it, obviously. Then you build a skeleton. So you just draw these nodes, just drag them around. That's how you create a skeleton. And then you go into animate mode, and you just start moving the bones around. So in this case, all I needed then was, I didn't even have to set a key here. This was just the default position of the bones to begin with. And then half a second later, quite literally, I put this key right here. And so what that did was it takes this whole idea of her being deflated and really, really ramps it up. Now let me play this back and you'll see what I'm talking about. So the idea is that she's really annoyed with this guy, but she's deflated at the same time. Now the one thing that needs to also be done, however, is a transformation. Initially, I had taken the animate tool and scaled this up and repositioned it. The problem with that is what's happening is the transformation is happening prior to the application of the plastic tool, and so what that's going to do is it's going to break the effect of the plastic tool. So how do you solve that? The most obvious way I can think of would be to go into this frame and invoke the animate tool. Now, I don't think we can if there aren't active cells. So that means we need to be a little more creative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a dummy level. Okay, and the only reason I'm creating this dummy level is purely for the purpose of doing the transformation. So to show you how this works, you can see column 2 is the Akari column. And what's happening is column 2 is being piped through the plastic tool. And now I've got column 4 that I just created. So if I take the plastic tool column and simply pipe it through column 4, then any transformations that I do to column 4 will be applied to both the plastic tool and the column, or level, I guess is the proper term, that the plastic tool is being applied to. So now I can hit the animate tool, scale this up, position her in the frame however I want, and now you will see everything just works correctly. And that's it. Now I was gonna talk about maybe creating a patch layer because of this anomaly here as well. So you not only have in this case the anomaly across her face that I already had to paint over and fix, but also you've got this, and this is the result of using the free transform tool in Krita as well, which this is not Krita's fault. This is me creating a selection in order to isolate her shoulders, and then this does in fact need to be fixed. And the way I would fix that normally would be I would just take any typical brush. I guess we could use this one, and you're going to hit the B key to paint, and then in OpenToonz it's the R key to sample a color, and now I can go in and just fix it. And this painting, when I hit save all, will actually be applied to the entire that's not what I meant to say. It'll be applied to this drawing, and this particular individual frame, which is a ping image, will be saved to disk with the changes baked in. So in this case, though, truth be told, that was not necessary because the transformation of the level made it so you really can't see her shoulders anyway. So the only thing I would maybe say here is I think maybe it is scaled a little more than I wanted. Let's see. That kind of sort of feels better, I think. Let's give that a crack. Yeah, because you can see a little bit more of her shoulders now, so you get that sense of her feeling deflated, which I really like. So, File, Save All, and indeed we can prove to ourselves now that that last frame, which was frame number 66, well, actually, I'm sorry, it's not 66, it's actually 30. Because these frames that came out of Krita were all repeated, so I just deleted them. So it's actually frame 30. So now we should be able to go back here and find frame 30 and confirm that indeed the changes are baked in. It looks like it's patched up. Now if I go to the next image, you can see that the anomaly is back again. So when you go in to a plain old raster level in OpenToonz and start painting, once you save all those changes get saved. That might seem like an obvious thing, but it's not obvious when you're dealing with a program that's kind of parametric and is making modifications to things oftentimes in a non-destructive way. So in other words, a good example of that would be these images have not been modified so that she's larger in the frame. If I did a transform in Krita, that's exactly what would happen. You know, she would be permanently sized up and you wouldn't be able to go back because all this stuff down here would be erased. But the plastic tool is non-destructive. So frankly, a lot of the things you do in OpenToonz are non-destructive, or you could say parametric, meaning that downstream you can change something and the changes just propagate. That's effectively what I did here. I took the effect of the plastic tool and added another layer of modification, and I can always reverse it just like that. I can always go back, see? So it wasn't destructive to the images. When you go into the image strip and start painting to fix things, that's destructive. You're actually changing the underlying pixel data. So anyway, it's not tough to understand, but it is an important distinction to kind of know what you're doing, whether you're, like breaking things or not. So anyway, with that, I think we're done. I'm really happy with how this came out. I'm glad I could have brought it into Blender, could have brought it into HitFilm Express, could have brought it into Vegas, decided to bring it into OpenToonz, and I think it was the right choice because that plastic tool, that just that little change in her behavior to make her look deflated, I think really sells the attitude much better. This is where it would have been finished. This is where it's now finished. Now that's a subtle change, but there's a lot of attitude in that, half second of motion. So anyway, with that, I will call it good. Should I go ahead and render it and stick it in the picture here live and on camera? I guess I will, just so we can see how it cuts into the show. So with that, we will go to the render folder, and we're going to call this 0077.mp4. By all rights, it should not render. Oh, it is rendering. Okay. So how is that possible? Let's go back to Blender. Oh, it's possible because I think that's a good question, because this is 0077.mp4, and I'm really sure I just named this. Let's cancel this. I'm really sure I just named this 0077.mp4. So enemy render 0077.mp4. Now it won't. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's unpredictable behavior. I just went to re-render it, and it is saving it, even though it tells me that it knows that that file already exists. So 99 times out of 100, if Blender is open and you're trying to render like any of these video files, if I try to re-render them, you won't be able to, because effectively they're an open file, and the system won't let you overwrite a file that's currently open in another program. In this case, it appears to have worked. Let me see if the anomaly is there. The anomaly is gone, so that's kind of interesting. That is definitely weird. What is it about MP4s coming out of OpenToonz that allows them to overwrite when doing the same exact thing out of Krita would not work? Weird, weird, weird. But anyway, let's see how it plays, and then we're going to call it a day. She drops the sword. Yeah, I like it. Deflated. Now be a good girl. And then, boom, she's going to be really, 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 really irritated right here. Now that's the AVI, I'm sure, not the MP4. Yep. And in fact, yeah, that's the AVI, 0077.avi. So that's why you see that anomaly right there. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's hard to see probably, but here it's gone. There it is. So we're going to have to fix that too. But that's a problem for the next session, and as you know, there will be more later.